Imagine you woke up as a Roman gladiator in 80 AD, not to the familiar quiet of your own time, but to the chilling scrape of a metal bolt, the smell of damp stone, and the distant thunderous roar of a city celebrating the grand opening of the Colosseum, an arena that will soon demand your blood. The gate swung inwards, a monstrous metal maw spitting me out into the blinding glare of the Colosseum. The roar of the crowd hit me like a physical blow, a wave of sound that vibrated in my chest, in my bones. 50,000 faces, a sea of blurred features, all focused on me, on this me, a man who'd woken up a few short days ago in a strange, terrifying world. My opponent stood waiting, a hulking silhouette against the bright sand. The Murmillo. He was huge, a mountain of muscle clad in bronze. His helmet, a grotesque fish-head mask with a narrow visor, seemed to dwarf even his already imposing frame. His shield, a towering semicircle of bronze, was practically a wall, and his gladius, a short sword, gleamed menacingly in the sunlight. This wasn't a fight, it was a slaughter waiting to happen. My training, intensive as it had been, felt utterly inadequate against such a seasoned veteran. My own gear felt suddenly pathetic. My relatively lightweight armor, my less sturdy sword. This wasn't a game, this was a death sentence. My mind screamed, a cacophony of modern anxieties battling with the raw, primal fear of imminent death. Logic fought against instinct, whispering of strategy and technique, while my body trembled with a terror as old as humanity itself. The crowd's roar morphed into a dull, throbbing ache. Every muscle in my body screamed even before the fight began. The Murmillo moved first, a deceptively slow, lumbering advance that belied the speed and power hidden beneath. His shield advanced like a fortress, a wall of bronze protecting him from any potential attack. I tried to follow the rudimentary tactics drilled into me, attempting to maintain a safe distance, to observe his movements, trying to find an opening. But my heart hammered against my ribs, each beat echoing in my ears, drowning out the screams of the crowd, the commands of the lanista echoing faintly from somewhere far away. He struck. A swift, powerful thrust. I barely deflected it, the force of the blow knocking me sideways. The bronze of his shield sang against mine, a terrifying clang that echoed through the amphitheater. My own movements were clumsy, frantic. This wasn't the measured and calculated dance of a skilled gladiator. It was a desperate struggle for survival. Panic clawed at me. I was outmatched, outmuscled, and outclassed. I had a split second to make a choice: fight or die. I chose to fight. With a guttural cry that surprised even myself, I lunged, aiming for his exposed leg. He sidestepped with surprising agility, his shield sweeping across, forcing me back. The blow caught my shoulder, sending a white-hot pain through my arm. I stumbled, my breath ragged, and the taste of blood filling my mouth. The fight became a blur of steel and sweat, of desperate parries and clumsy attacks. Each clash of metal sent shivers down my spine. The roar of the crowd seemed to intensify with every exchange, a relentless wave crashing over me. I moved instinctively, relying on the ingrained muscle memory of the training, my body guided by an adrenaline-fueled primal instinct to survive. I caught a glimpse of his face through his visor's narrow slit. He wasn't smiling. There was nothing but cold, brutal calculation in his eyes. He was a professional, a killer, and I was his prey. The fight dragged on, an eternity compressed into a few brutal minutes. I found myself relying on instinct over training. The blows fell upon me, each one agonizing. I was bruised, bleeding, exhausted. My body felt like it was dissolving. But I fought on. My modern sensibilities had completely dissolved. I was no longer me. I was a cornered animal fighting for life. Suddenly, a break. The Murmillo faltered for a heartbeat, his foot catching on a loose stone in the sand. It was a flicker, a fraction of a second, but it was enough. I saw my chance, a desperate, almost suicidal attack. I drove my sword towards his exposed side, a desperate, all-or-nothing move. The blade found its mark, piercing his flesh. His roar of pain was swallowed up by the thunderous applause of the crowd. He staggered, his immense frame collapsing to the sand, his bronze shield clattering to the ground. The fight was over. The relief that washed over me was almost as intense as the fear had been. I had won. I, a man thrown into a brutal alien world, had survived. But even in victory, I felt no elation, only a bone-deep exhaustion and the chilling realization that this was just the beginning. The next fight and the next would surely come.
The Murmillo was a mountain of a man, all muscle and bone, his bronze helmet gleaming under the midday sun. My own bronze felt heavy, leaden, a suffocating weight on my neck. He charged, a roaring beast, his gladius a blur of deadly intent. My training, brutal as it was, felt woefully inadequate against such a seasoned opponent. I parried, dodged, stumbled, the roar of the crowd a deafening tide crashing over me. His shield, a solid wall of bronze, deflected my blows. Sweat stung my eyes, my breath came in ragged gasps. This wasn't a fight. It was a mauling, a slow, agonizing descent into oblivion. Each strike, each near miss, chipped away at my resolve. The taste of blood, my own or his, I couldn't tell, filled my mouth. I was losing. I could feel it in the heavy blows landing on my shield, in the burning ache in my muscles, and in the growing numbness in my arms. He pushed me back towards the edge of the arena sand. The crowd's cheers turned into a frenzied cacophony, a wave of sound that threatened to crush me. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was it. This was how it ended. A nameless gladiator, another victim of the Colosseum's insatiable hunger for blood. But then, a flicker of opportunity. He overextended, his momentum carrying him slightly forward, a gap, a sliver of a chance. With a desperate yell, a primal scream ripped from the depths of my terror, I lunged. My gladius, guided by pure adrenaline and a fierce will to survive, found its mark. It sliced through his exposed side, a clean, precise wound that sent him sprawling to his knees. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath before erupting into a thunderous roar of approval. I stood over him, my breath ragged, my body shaking. He didn't move. The silence that followed the roar was deafening, broken only by the drip, drip, drip of blood on the sand. I had won. I had actually won.
A hush fell over the Colosseum, then a ripple of sound, a wave of appreciation turning into a tsunami of applause. I looked up to see the emperor's representative, a tall, imposing figure in richly embroidered robes descending from the imperial box. My heart sank. This wasn't the celebratory acknowledgement I'd expected. It wasn't the garlands, the praise, the brief respite from the endless cycle of bloodshed. He approached me, his expression unreadable. The crowd's cheers seemed distant, muffled, as if I were underwater. He spoke, his voice a low rumble that cut through the lingering silence of the arena. He didn't praise my skill, didn't congratulate me on my victory. Instead, he offered me a choice, a twisted, chilling alternative to death or more brutal fights in the arena. "The Emperor has observed your prowess," he said, his words heavy with unspoken implications. "Your skill with the gladius is undeniable. You show the spirit of a true warrior." My stomach churned. "He offers you a place in the Imperial Guard. A place in the Imperial Guard, freedom, a reprieve from the arena." But the relief was fleeting. His words hung in the air like a poisoned dart. "It is a position of considerable trust, a great honor," he continued, his voice laced with a subtle threat, "but one that demands absolute loyalty, unwavering obedience, and a willingness to fight." The words hung heavy in the air. Freedom from the arena meant entering another, even more treacherous arena, the political battles of the Roman Empire. The emperor's favor was a fickle thing. One moment you stood at the peak of power, the next you were cast into oblivion. The very man who offers you salvation could become your destroyer. The thought was terrifying. The representative extended a hand, offering me a small, intricately carved ivory figurine, an image of a soldier. It was a symbol of my new life, a pledge of allegiance. A life of servitude and danger, yes, but a life that held a sliver of hope for a future beyond the bloody sands of the Colosseum. The crowd's cheers were a distant echo now. My future wasn't sealed with glory, not yet. It was sealed with a new form of terror, the labyrinthine intrigue of the imperial court, where the blade was just as deadly, and the enemy perhaps more cunning and far more ruthless than any murmillo I'd ever faced. The fight for survival wasn't over. It had simply changed its battlefield. The roar of the crowd still echoed in my ears, a phantom wave crashing against the shores of my stunned mind. My body, a landscape of aches and bruises, felt strangely light, almost buoyant, on the heels of victory. The blood, thankfully, had been mostly the Murmillo's, but the victory felt hollow. The cheers had been for a spectacle, a brutal dance of death, not a testament to my courage or skill. I was a pawn, a tool, and now, apparently, a tool of interest to the Emperor himself. They led me through labyrinthine corridors, the scent of incense and something subtly acrid, like burnt herbs, hung heavy in the air. The guards, clad in gleaming armor, were impassive, their faces masks of disciplined indifference. My escort, a burly man with a scar that bisected his eyebrow, remained silent, his gaze fixed on the ornate mosaics beneath my sandaled feet. Every step felt heavy, every breath labored. I wasn't sure whether the fear stemmed from my wounds or from the anticipation of the unknown that lay ahead. The Emperor's private chambers were a stark contrast to the brutal reality of the arena. Rich tapestries depicted scenes of triumph and glory, their colors vibrant and dazzling even in the fading light. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfumes, a far cry from the stench of sweat and blood that permeated the ludus. My own body felt disgustingly alien in this opulent setting. The Emperor Domitian sat upon a throne of polished ivory and ebony, a figure of immense power and unnerving calm. He was younger than I expected, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to pierce through me, assessing every tremor in my hand, every hesitation in my posture. He was flanked by equally imposing figures, advisors, guards, sycophants. Each seemed to hum with a silent intensity. I felt small, insignificant, an insect caught in a king's web. He spoke in a low, resonant voice, surprisingly gentle considering the context. The games were spectacular. Your fighting style unprecedented, a rare blend of aggression and cunning. You intrigue me. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the chamber. I managed a curt bow, my throat too dry to formulate a response. The mere proximity to this man, the center of this empire, was suffocating. Each word he spoke was a carefully placed stone in my path, an invisible pressure building to an unknown, possibly deadly climax. Many men fight in the arena, but few possess your flair, your dedication, your survival instinct. He paused, his eyes now subtly assessing, testing, weighing me. I offer you a chance to transcend the sands, to leave the arena forever. This was it, the moment of decision, freedom, a release from the daily grind of blood and pain. But something in his words felt off. There was a chilling detachment in his benevolence, a predatory gleam behind his calculated calmness. The thought that this opportunity might be a cage gilded in gold, a death sentence dressed in imperial finery, sent a shiver down my spine. "You will serve as a member of my imperial guard," he declared, the statement landing like a heavy hammer. "A position of honor, of trust. You will be afforded privileges beyond the dreams of most." He gestured to a richly decorated chair placed opposite his throne. "Come, sit. Let us discuss the particulars."
The offer hung in the air, shimmering with the promise of power, of escape. But fear remained. A cold serpent coiled around my heart. To join the Imperial Guard meant trading the arena for a different kind of battleground. A world of political intrigue, deadly betrayals, and the constant lurking shadow of imperial favor. There was a cruel irony in the idea of surviving the Colosseum only to enter another arena of blood, but this time a battle of minds and loyalties, not just of brute force. As I slowly approached the chair, each step felt like a gamble, a step further into an unknown future, a step towards a new type of terror, a terror far more insidious than the roar of the crowd. The scent of incense suddenly seemed cloying, the opulence suffocating. I had escaped one arena of death, only to find myself standing at the entrance to another, more treacherous one. I sat, and the Emperor smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The Emperor's favor is a fickle mistress. One moment I'm basking in the afterglow of victory, lauded as a hero, a man plucked from the dust of the ludus and thrust into the gilded cage of the imperial guard. The next, I'm staring down the barrel of a conspiracy so elaborate, so treacherous, it makes the Colosseum seem like a child's game. My days were filled with the polished marble of the palace, the murmur of hushed conversations in Latin I was slowly mastering, and the chilling weight of responsibility that came with protecting the most powerful man in the empire. My new comrades, however, were a breed apart from the rough-and-tumble gladiators. These men were wolves in sheep's clothing, their smiles sharp as broken glass. Among them was Lucius, a man whose loyalty to Domitian seemed unshakable, whose camaraderie had felt genuine, almost brotherly. He was my shadow, my confidant, a viper nestled in my bosom. It happened under the cloak of darkness, a whisper of betrayal in the stale air of the barracks. Lucius, his face shadowed, his voice a sibilant hiss, led me to a secluded corner, a place where the echoes of the night muffled the sounds of the city. He spoke of a plot, a conspiracy against Domitian, naming names, weaving a tapestry of deceit that implicated me with chilling efficiency. He spoke of documents, forged seals, a clandestine meeting, all things I knew nothing about. Yet as he described them, I could almost feel their weight in my hands, their cold presence a tangible menace. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the suffocating silence. He'd planted the evidence, meticulously laid the trap. The sheer audacity, the calculated coldness of it left me speechless. The Praetorian Guard burst in, their faces grim, their movements precise. They were efficient, brutal, their loyalty unquestioned. They didn't need to hear my protests. My own words, twisted and distorted, were already echoing in the halls of the palace. The weight of their accusations was heavier than any bronze helmet I'd ever worn. The familiar fear, sharpened and refined in the crucible of the arena, returned, cold and unrelenting. But this was different. This wasn't the roar of a crowd. This was the silent, deadly judgment of power. I was shoved into a dark, cramped cell, the stench of damp stone and fear clinging to my skin. Escape seemed impossible. The walls were thick, the guards vigilant. Yet, the instinct for survival, honed in the arena, kicked in. It was a primal thing, a desperation that drowned out the fear, pushing me toward a frantic search for any weakness, any loophole. My mind raced, remembering the layout of the palace from my patrols, recalling unguarded corridors and hidden passageways. A chance observation, a carelessly open window, and the glimmer of a moonlit alleyway were all that stood between me and the Emperor's wrath. Using a hidden knife I had kept, a relic from my gladiatorial days, I freed myself from my bonds with trembling hands. The escape was fraught with danger, a desperate dash through shadowed corridors, a heart-stopping climb down a precarious rope made from bed sheets.
Each footstep echoed like a thunderclap in the silence, each breath a gamble. The city, once a symbol of grandeur and power, now felt like a labyrinth of shadows, a place where every corner held the potential for capture, for death. I found myself in the labyrinthine streets of Subura, a world away from the polished marble of the palace. This was Rome's underbelly, a festering wound hidden beneath the veneer of civilization. The air hung heavy with the stench of garbage, unwashed bodies, and desperation. Here the whispers were not of political intrigue, but of survival. The currency was not gold, but cunning and desperation. I sought refuge in the shadows, blending in with the throngs of impoverished citizens, my elegant imperial guard uniform replaced with ragged, borrowed clothes. I was a ghost, a fugitive, hunted by the might of Rome. The streets were my new arena, a battleground as brutal and unforgiving as the Colosseum. But this time, my enemy was not a fellow gladiator, but the entire power of the Roman Empire. My fate hung precariously in the balance, a thread suspended over the chasm of oblivion. The fear was still there, gnawing at the edges of my courage, but there was something else too, a spark of defiance, a refusal to be silenced, a determination to survive, to reclaim my own narrative from the clutches of fate. My freedom was gone. The guard was gone. The only certainty was the next shadow and the next step forward. The taste of blood, even days later, clung to the back of my throat, a metallic tang that mirrored the constant tremor in my hands. My victory in the arena, the Emperor's nod, the offer of a place in the Imperial Guard, all felt like a fever dream now, a hazy mirage shimmering in the harsh reality of my betrayal. Lucius, my supposed friend, my training partner, had sold me out. A whispered conversation, a carelessly dropped scroll, and suddenly I was a hunted man, a traitor to the very man who had just offered me freedom.
The sewers were my sanctuary, a labyrinthine network of stench and darkness. The air hung thick and heavy, a suffocating blanket of damp earth and rotting refuse. Rats scurried through the gloom, their eyes glinting like malevolent jewels. My bronze greaves, once symbols of glory, now scraped against the grimy stone, a constant reminder of my precarious situation. Each shadow seemed to writhe with potential danger, every creak and groan of the ancient city echoing the relentless pursuit behind me. Hunger gnawed at me, a constant gnawing pain that rivaled the aching bruises blooming across my body. I scavenged for scraps, pilfered half-rotten fruit from overflowing bins, a far cry from the coarse barley porridge of the ludus. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford, the constant fear of discovery pushing away the blessed oblivion. The city, once a spectacle of awe-inspiring grandeur, had become a menacing predator, its streets teeming with potential betrayers. For days I drifted through the underbelly of Rome, a ghost haunting the city's decaying heart. My only companion was the gnawing fear that clutched at my soul, a constant, icy hand squeezing the life from me. The whispers of the Praetorian Guard, their heavy boots echoing on the cobblestones, were my relentless soundtrack. I knew I couldn't survive like this for long. My strength, once honed in the brutal training yard, was waning, replaced by a paralyzing despair. Then, one night, huddled in the shadow of a crumbling temple, a flicker of movement caught my eye. A group of people, cloaked and hushed, gathered in a hidden alcove. Their whispers, barely audible, resonated with a peculiar sense of calm amid the chaos. Curiosity, A dangerous companion in my situation spurred me closer. I watched from the darkness, my heart hammering against my ribs. They spoke of faith, of a man named Jesus, of forgiveness and redemption. I, a man steeped in violence and bloodshed, a creature of the arena, felt a strange pull towards their quiet devotion. Their words, spoken in hushed reverence, pierced the cold cynicism that had taken root in my heart. The notion of a power beyond the emperor, beyond the brutal realities of Roman society, offered a sliver of hope in my desperate situation. As I watched, one of them noticed me. A young woman, her face etched with both fear and compassion, approached cautiously. Her eyes, though hesitant, held no judgment, only a deep, unwavering empathy. She offered me bread and water, simple things, yet luxuries in my desperate circumstances. She spoke in hushed tones. Her words painted a picture of a different world, one where forgiveness and love transcended the violence and brutality that had defined my existence. She introduced herself as Lydia. She explained that they were Christians, followers of a new faith, a secret society living in the shadows, hunted by the Roman authorities for their beliefs. They offered me sanctuary, a haven from the relentless pursuit of the Praetorian Guard, but their offer came with a price. To remain amongst them, I would have to renounce my past, embrace their faith, and risk certain martyrdom if discovered. Or I could reject their offer and continue my desperate flight, a fugitive forever haunted by the shadows of Rome. The choice was agonizing, a stark contrast between the fleeting hope of spiritual redemption and the chilling reality of continued survival in the brutal Roman world. My mind raced, a whirlwind of conflicting emotions and desperate calculations. Could I truly abandon the life I knew, the brutal skills honed in the arena? Could I find solace in a faith that preached love and forgiveness when my hands were stained with the blood of my enemies? Or was my survival, my continued existence, worth the price of eternal damnation in the eyes of the Roman Empire and perhaps even God? The weight of that decision, more perilous than any gladiatorial fight, pressed down on me, crushing the last vestiges of my hope. The stench of decay clung to the alleyways like a shroud. My pursuers, imperial guards, their faces grim and determined, were hot on my heels. Betrayal tasted like ash in my mouth. The supposed friend, Cassius, had led me into a trap, whispering promises of escape while sealing my fate. My bronze gladius, my only companion now, felt heavy and useless against the systematic hunt unfolding around me. I ran blindly, the labyrinthine streets of Rome blurring into a chaotic tapestry of shadows and fear. My lungs burned, my muscles screamed in protest, but the threat of capture, of torture, fueled my desperate flight. I needed to disappear, to melt into the very fabric of this city, a city I still barely understood but now instinctively feared. Then I saw it, a seemingly insignificant crack in the ancient wall, barely visible beneath a tangle of overgrown vines. A flicker of movement within, a faint, almost imperceptible hum of voices. Desperation, that cruel and efficient taskmaster, propelled me towards it. I squeezed through the narrow opening, my body scraping against rough stone, and found myself in a claustrophobic tunnel. The air was thick with the damp chill of the earth, punctuated by the earthy smell of the soil and a strange, almost sweet aroma that I couldn't immediately place. The tunnel descended into a network of subterranean passages. The darkness was complete, broken only by the occasional guttering flame held aloft by unseen hands. My senses, sharpened by fear and exhaustion, struggled to adapt to this new world beneath the city. Every drip of water echoed like a thunderclap.
Every rustle sent shivers down my spine. But as my eyes adjusted, I began to make out shapes, figures huddled together in the dim light, their faces bathed in an ethereal glow. The sight that greeted me stole my breath away. It was a hidden basilica carved into the living rock, far more expansive than the narrow passage I had entered. Hundreds of people, men, women, and children, were gathered in a silent, reverent assembly. They were simple folk, their faces etched with a mixture of awe and fear, yet also a profound peace that stood in stark contrast to the violence and brutality I'd known above ground. In the center, a lone figure, his voice a low, resonant hum, spoke words in a language I didn't understand, yet somehow resonated deep within me. They were prayers, I realized, humble petitions to a power beyond the Roman Empire, a God of mercy and forgiveness. I recognized the symbols now, crudely painted on the walls, the ichthys, the fish, a secret sign whispered among these hidden communities. This wasn't some pagan ritual. This was a Christian gathering, a forbidden act punishable by death. I was among the followers of Christ, a religion utterly foreign to my modern upbringing, yet strangely compelling in this moment of utter vulnerability. The words of the prayer, though I didn't grasp their meaning, spoke of hope, of redemption, of a love that transcended the brutal realities of the Roman world. As the service progressed, a profound sense of peace settled over me, replacing the terror that had consumed me for the past few days. This was a sanctuary, a secret place where hope and faith flourished in the shadow of oppression. It was a stark contrast to the violence and brutality I'd experienced in the arena and later in the streets, where survival was a brutal, relentless struggle. This was different. Here lives were preserved not by steel and cunning, but by the power of belief. The weight of my choices pressed down on me. I could continue my flight, seeking refuge in the anonymity of the Roman underworld, forever looking over my shoulder, always running from the long arm of the empire, or I could find solace and meaning in this unexpected haven, this community bound by a faith that offered a promise of eternal peace, even in the face of mortal danger. The consequences of both paths were terrifyingly clear. One offered survival at the cost of constant fear. The other offered peace, but at the risk of martyrdom. The service ended, the murmur of prayers fading into the hushed silence of the catacombs. The faces of the people around me, though worn and weary, radiated a quiet strength. A small, frail woman with kind eyes offered me a piece of bread, coarse and simple, but it was nourishment for the soul as much as for the body. I felt a connection, a kinship with these people, a shared humanity forged in the crucible of shared oppression. As I ate, I knew my decision.
Survival, once my only goal, felt small and meaningless now. I had found something more profound in this hidden world, something worth fighting for, even if it meant sacrificing everything I once held dear. The air hung thick and cold, heavy with the scent of damp earth and the faint, almost imperceptible aroma of incense. My breath plumed out before me, visible in the flickering light of the single oil lamp held precariously by Lucius, the young Christian who had offered me sanctuary. Just hours ago, I had knelt beside him, a stranger in a strange land, listening to his whispers of a crucified Savior, a God who understood suffering. Now, that same sanctuary was a tomb. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed down the narrow tunnel, amplified in the oppressive silence, the rhythmic thud of legionary boots, 30 of them at least. Lucius's hand, trembling slightly, tightened around my arm. His eyes, usually bright with an almost unsettling serenity, were wide with terror. Betrayal. It had come swiftly, brutally from within. Cassius, the man I had considered a brother in arms, a comrade in this desperate flight, had led the soldiers here. His ambition, it seemed, outweighed his loyalty. He had sold me out for a reward, a promotion, a place higher in Domitian's rotten court. There was no escape. The tunnel narrowed, ending in a small circular chamber, the walls slick with moisture. Behind us, darkness. Before us, the cold, hard steel of the Roman legion. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The bronze-hilted gladius, once a tool of death, now a symbol of my faith, felt heavy in my hand. The familiar weight, however, provided a semblance of comfort, a tangible connection to my past self, even in this hopeless situation. The first legionary, his face shadowed and grim, stepped into the chamber. His gladius, gleaming under the lamplight, was twice the size of my own. He didn't bother with words, just advanced, his weapon raised. This wasn't the Colosseum. No roaring crowds, no emperor's judgment, just the cold, hard reality of death. But something had changed within me. The fear was still there, a gnawing presence, but it was overshadowed by a different kind of strength, a resolve forged in the crucible of faith. I met his charge with a desperate cry, a guttural roar that surprised even myself. My gladius, lighter than his, was faster, more nimble. I parried his blow, the steel screeching against steel. Sparks flew, illuminating the dust motes swirling in the stale air. For a moment, I felt the echo of my training, the discipline of the ludus coursing through my veins. It wasn't skill, but desperation that fueled my movements. Each parry, each thrust was a prayer, a plea for divine intervention. Lucius, silent now, watched with wide, terrified eyes. I moved like a phantom, weaving through the soldiers, my gladius a blur of motion. Each strike was precise, deliberate, focused on exploiting gaps in their armor, aiming for weak points. I fought not for glory, but for survival, for the belief that had saved me. One legionary fell, a silent thud against the damp stones. Another stumbled, his gladius clattering to the ground. Yet more kept coming, their faces contorted in a mixture of fury and fear. The chamber was a maelstrom of steel and blood, a ballet of death played out in the flickering lamplight. The weight of numbers was crushing. My stamina was failing, my muscles screaming in protest. But a new energy propelled me forward. Not the adrenaline of the arena, but the quiet strength of faith. I felt a calm settle over me, an acceptance of my fate, a belief that even death held a meaning, a purpose. Lucius, seeing an opening, seized the moment. He grabbed a fallen gladius, swinging it with a ferocity that belied his small stature. He fought with a righteous fury, defending me, defending our faith. One by one they fell, their screams a counterpoint to my own ragged breaths. The lamplight flickered and died, plunging the chamber into darkness. Only the clash of steel and the gasps of the dying illuminated our final stand. Then silence, a heavy silence, broken only by the sound of my own ragged breaths and the distant echoes of footsteps receding down the tunnel. I lay amidst the fallen, bruised and bleeding, but alive. Lucius was unharmed, his face etched with awe.
The air hung heavy with the scent of blood and something else, triumph perhaps, or something even more profound. We had faced death, and we had emerged victorious.
One legionary fell, a silent thud against the damp stones. Another stumbled, his gladius clattering to the ground. Yet more kept coming, their faces contorted in a mixture of fury and fear. The chamber was a maelstrom of steel and blood, a ballet of death played out in the flickering lamplight. The weight of numbers was crushing. My stamina was failing, my muscles screaming in protest. But a new energy propelled me forward, not the adrenaline of the arena, but the quiet strength of faith. I felt a calm settle over me, an acceptance of my fate, a belief that even death held a meaning, a purpose. Lucius, seeing an opening, seized the moment. He grabbed a fallen gladius, swinging it with a ferocity that belied his small stature. He fought with a righteous fury, defending me, defending our faith. One by one they fell, their screams a counterpoint to my own ragged breaths. The lamplight flickered and died, plunging the chamber into darkness. Only the clash of steel and the gasps of the dying illuminated our final stand. Then, silence. A heavy silence, broken only by the sound of my own ragged breathing and the distant echoes of footsteps receding down the tunnel. I lay amidst the fallen, bruised and bleeding, but alive. Lucius was unharmed, his face etched with awe. The air hung heavy with the scent of incense and fear. Around me, the flickering candlelight danced across the faces of my fellow Christians, their expressions a mixture of awe and terror. Just moments ago, I'd been cornered, a lone wolf surrounded by a pack of Roman hounds, their steel glinting under the dim light of the catacombs. My last stand had been brutal. I'd fought with the fury of a cornered animal, fueled by a faith I'd only just discovered, a faith that had bloomed in the suffocating darkness of these subterranean chambers. But even my strength, honed in the blood-soaked sands of the Colosseum, couldn't hold out forever. They were overwhelming me, their spears and swords a deadly ballet of Roman efficiency. I closed my eyes, expecting the cold embrace of death. Then a sound, a low scraping, almost imperceptible against the clang of steel and the shouts of the soldiers. A sound that broke through the cacophony of death, offering a sliver of hope in the face of oblivion. I opened my eyes, my gaze darting around, desperately searching for the source. And then I saw it. Behind the altar, where the priest had just moments before raised his hands in prayer, a section of the wall shifted. Dust rained down, disturbed by the opening of a hidden passage, a dark, gaping maw swallowing the gloom. It was small, barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through, but it was there, a lifeline in the heart of death. The shift in the Roman soldiers' posture was palpable. Their advance faltered, replaced by a moment of stunned confusion. They hadn't expected this. They were used to dealing with unwavering walls, not secret passages. This wasn't in their playbook. Their commander barked orders, a flurry of Latin commands that echoed through the cavernous space. But the brief, hesitation was all the time I needed. I didn't hesitate. The adrenaline coursing through my veins, the sheer desperate will to live, propelled me forward. I pushed past the stunned faces of the Christians who watched in silent prayer as I squeezed through the narrow opening. The rough stone scraped against my skin. The darkness enveloped me, and the sound of the pursuing soldiers faded behind me. I was swallowed by the earth. The tunnel was claustrophobic, a suffocating passage carved into the very bowels of Rome. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and something else, something ancient, something almost primal. I hand-scrabbled against the uneven walls, my boots slipping on the slick stone. Every few steps I had to pause, catch my breath, feel the cold sweat slick on my brow. This wasn't the grand, echoing spaces of the Colosseum. This was a desperate, silent struggle against the crushing weight of the earth. But the darkness wasn't entirely empty. There were faint sounds echoing from ahead, the drip, drip, drip of water, the occasional rustle of unseen creatures. These were small noises, but in the oppressive silence they felt monumental. Each drop was a reminder of my precarious existence, each rustle a potential threat in this labyrinthine underworld. I pressed on, driven by an instinct for survival that now superseded even my newfound faith. The passage twisted and turned, a subterranean maze that seemed to stretch forever. I had no idea where I was going, only that I had to keep moving, that I had to escape, that I had to survive. Eventually, after what felt like an eternity, the tunnel opened into a larger chamber. The air felt fresher here, carrying the faint scent of night-blooming jasmine. A shaft of light pierced the darkness from a high opening above, revealing a rough-hewn stairway leading upwards. Hope, sharp and sudden, pierced the darkness of my despair. I climbed the stairs, my muscles burning, my lungs aching. When I finally reached the top, I emerged into the night, into the cool Roman air. I was outside the city walls, hidden amongst the olive groves, bathed in the soft glow of the moon. I was free, for now. Looking back at the city's shadowy silhouette against the night sky, I knew my journey was far from over. The escape from the catacombs hadn't ended my fight for survival. It had merely shifted the battlefield. But for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I felt a flicker of something other than fear, a spark of hope, a newfound resolve to create my own destiny, free from the games and the intrigues of the Roman Empire.
The air hung thick with the smell of damp earth and fear. My breath hitched in my throat, each inhale a rasping prayer. Betrayed, hunted, and cornered like a rat in a crumbling tomb, I had nowhere left to run. The legionaries' torches cast flickering shadows that danced like phantoms on the rough-hewn walls, their faces grim, impassive masks of Roman authority. Their swords glinted, a terrifying promise of the end. But something had shifted within me. The terror was still there, a cold knot in my stomach.
but it was intertwined with something else, a quiet, unwavering strength. The strength born not of muscle and bronze, but of faith. Faith in something beyond the brutality of the Colosseum, beyond the treachery of the imperial court, beyond even the certainty of death. It had started in the hidden chamber, a secret sanctuary where I'd stumbled upon a gathering of Christians. Their quiet devotion, their unshakable belief in a God who offered redemption even in the face of such overwhelming adversity, had pierced the darkness of my despair. Their hymns, whispered in the gloom, echoed the silent cries of my own heart, a heart weary of bloodshed and betrayal. They offered me solace, a fragile light in the oppressive shadows of Roman rule. They offered me hope. Now surrounded, there was no escape. I drew my short sword, a pitiful weapon against the legion, but I raised it, not with the practiced grace of a gladiator, but with the resolute stance of a man at peace. The first blow fell, a brutal strike aimed at my head. I parried, the clang of steel ringing out in the claustrophobic space, a stark contrast to the quiet hum of faith within me. I fought not for glory, not for survival, but for the belief that had taken root in my soul. Each blow I landed, each parry I managed, was fueled by a power that surpassed the physical, a power that even the disciplined might of the Roman legion couldn't match. The fight was desperate, brutal, a maelstrom of steel and sweat and screams. But as I fought, a strange calm settled over me. My moves, once honed for the kill in the arena, now seemed guided by something greater, something beyond my understanding. I fought with the fury of a cornered animal, yet the fear that had been my constant companion.